Hey everyone, my name is Dotan and I'm the creator of the GraphQL code generator. I'm a freelancer developer and an open source developer, and I work with a group called the Guild, and we're doing mostly web related projects and a lot of open source. And I started to work with GraphQL about 2 years ago, and since then I created a few open source projects related to GraphQL. One of them is the GraphQL code generator, and today I'm going to demonstrate the GraphQL code generator in action, and I'm going to demonstrate how to create a very simple GraphQL schema and how to generate TypeScript typings for this schema, how to create custom templates with the code generator, and how to use uh, the code generator to generate a database ORM with Mongoose. And I'm going to talk about the possibilities and the things you can do with the GraphQL code generator and how you can benefit from integrating it today into your projects. So let's start with a very simple example for a GraphQL server serving a schema, and we would like to integrate the GraphQL code generator into this project. We have a server side, which is really simple because we have just a small schema, and it has the author type, the post, and query, and we can just query for posts. And the resolvers are also very simple because we're just using static data that we declared here. And we also have a very simple client side built with Angular 2, and we will later see how we can integrate the GraphQL code generator into the client as well. But let's start with the server side and let's see the benefit we can get from using TypeScript and TypeScript typings in the server side. So let's start with adding the GraphQL code generator to the project. So just using yarn to execute yarn and GraphQL code generator. And the next step is to create a script, npm script that generates the typings for our schema. So let's add a script called generate, and we're using the executable of the GraphQL code generator called GQL gen, and we need to provide the GraphQL schema. So we can just provide it from a URL. Our server is served in 3000 port, so let's use it. And now we just need to tell the generator which template we want to use. So let's use TS for TypeScript. And the next step is to choose the output location. So let's pick src types dts to declare that this file is a typings file for TypeScript. So let's execute the script, and because we are using a remote server, we need to make sure that the server is running. So let's start it. So server is up, and we just need to run it with yarn generate. Oh, and missed the GraphQL endpoint. So let's execute yarn generate, and we can see the generator output saved to types DTS, and it's here. And this is a very simple schema, so we just have a few interfaces and we can just use them for autocomplete and to get the most of the TypeScript types check. And the generator also generates types for the GraphQL types, but also for the arguments. So we can just, for example, use the arguments type in our resolvers. So for example, let's put it here, and now instead of just guessing the variable name of the argument, GraphQL argument, we can use it like that, and we have autocomplete to the GraphQL declaration, and we can just use it here. Okay, so next we're going to see how we can benefit from the GraphQL code generator in our client-side project. The client-side project is just a simple Angular 2 project generated with the Angular CLI, and we created a GraphQL client with Apollo client and a very simple network interface pointing to our server, and we created a service called data service that uses the Apollo to implement a get data function, and the query we are using is this query, and we're querying for the fields we created on the server, ID, title, author, and the author fields. And in the client side, we have the app component where we use the data service to fetch the data, and we're using RxJS to map the result, and we're doing the same for the view. We're just using ng4 to iterate the query result, and it's a very simple result. We can just see we have a list of the data that we get from the server. Looking at the code, where you can see that we're not getting the most of TypeScript here, because we have to guess the variable names, and we're using any, which is not a best practice for TypeScript. So here we can use the power of the GraphQL code generator to create typings based on our server schema, but also based on our client-side queries. So we're getting the TypeScript typings for this specific query that we created for this specific client. And let's add the GraphQL codegen here. Cool. So we're using the same script we used for the server side. We just need to change only a small part of it. So let's create a client-side script for generate. We only need to add here the fact that we need to use the client-side queries, so we need to point them, just the last variable of the CLI. Let's add the path for the GraphQL files, so it's src GraphQL. So we're just using all TS files that under the GraphQL directory. So let's run our script. It's yarn generator, and it says that everything went well, and we have a new file called types.ts. And as you can see, it's a bit different from the server-side generated file, because here we have also the we have a namespace for our all post query, and now let's use it. Let's go first to the data service, and watch query is actually a generic, so we can just tell him what we're expecting to get in return. So we can use allposts.query, which is the root of the query that we're executing, and here we can actually declare that the result is an Apollo query observable of allpost.query. So when using it in the component, now we can just remove these, and we have autocomplete for the very basic Apollo variables, but now We also have autocomplete for the GraphQL result, so we can just use posts. We can also change the declaration of the post observable, and instead of using any, we can use the actual observable. And because we used map to map the result and get only the posts data, we can just use observable and use all posts dot post, and because it's an array, we use this. So now the declaration of the observable matches the GraphQL data that we expect to get. Okay, so now we're going to do a more advanced usage of the code generator. We're going to generate a custom template, and we're going first to create a directory called models, and let's create a file called ts.type.handlebars. And the file name is important because ts tells the generator that this is the extension of the file. The type tells the generator to do it for each GraphQL type, and the handlebars is the extension because the generator uses handlebars behind the scenes to generate the templates. And the templates actually is just a regular handlebars template. We can just use bindings and use helpers and stuff like that. And the GraphQL code generator will inject the schema context into our template, so we can just use it. In this case, we're going to get a file for each type that we have. And the schema now declares three types: the author, the post, and query. So we're going to get three files here, one for each type. And for now we're just using name, and we're going to get a file that just has the name of the type, and later we will extend it. So to use the generator in custom templates, we need to provide the primitives mapping, which is our way to tell the generator how to map the primitives. And we need to do it because the GraphQL specification has types for int and float, and in TypeScript int is going to be a number and a float is also going to be a number, so we need to do this mapping. So we're creating a special file called gqlgen.json here, and we're using this content, and this content is kind of copy paste because we just have the TypeScript primitives mapping, and we're telling the generator to flatten the types. You can read more about it in the README and the documentation. Now we're going to do the actual generation. Let's go to our package.json, and I added here a command that generates the custom template. We're using the same GQLgen CLI with the same URL, and the only thing that changed here is instead of using a predefined template, we're using project, and we specify the path for the templates. So let's run this command, yarn custom template, and the result is that the generator generated three files, and let's look at these files, and we have type, the type name in each file, and it's a TS file, and it will compile with your TypeScript compiler, and now we can extend it. Let's see an example. We can just use export interface and do something like that and generate it again, and now we have valid TypeScript interfaces, and we can also iterate all types and iterate the fields. So GraphQL supports now directives, and we can declare them for a schema. So let's see an example for a directive. We call the entity, and we declare that we want to use it on object types. And let's take this directive and put it in our schema for example, for author and post, but we decided not to put it for query. And this way we can just create filters or add metadata to the types. So now that we have it here, we can use it in the template. And we use it this way. We have a special helper that the GraphQL code generator injects called if directive, and we want to check this, which is the current context, which is the type, because we're compiling a file for each type. And let's check if entity is available, and only if the entity is available we want to generate this code. Otherwise we don't want to generate anything. So to use GraphQL directives in our project now, we need to do a small change in our script definition. Instead of using URL now, we must use the GraphQL schema object. So we can just point it to the specific file that we're using. In this case, our file is src schema, but we need to compile it because it's TypeScript. So let's add a script for compiling this file only, and save it to this path. And now replace the URL with export schema.js, and now ready to go. And let's see what happens when we generate now our custom template. Query file is empty as we wanted, and the post file has the generated content. And to fix the missing type, we can just need to do some handlebars work and use the previous context. And now we have a generated file. So this is a basic example of how to generate GraphQL custom code in any language. You can use it to generate your database ORM, or to generate XML definitions, or anything else that you need. And actually you can use the power of GraphQL directives and declare them and put them on anything. And this way you can generate custom code. So now I'm going to show a more advanced example of custom template. The template I'm going to show is a template for generating a complete ORM for your database using Mongoose. And it's a template I wrote for a project that uses Mongoose as its ORM, and I'm going to copy paste it, so it's gonna be a few seconds of magic and all of the files will appear. So while you waited, I changed the directive definitions and changed the handlebar templates, and now we have more directives, and we have more templates for more GraphQL types. And actually we're going to generate a full working ORM with links between the entities, and we can use Mongoose populate and everything that we need. And it's generated based on the GraphQL schema. So now that we have this kind of directives, you can see that we can use validation, match, column, ID, and stuff like that. So let's use it. So author is still an entity. ID, we need to declare it's an ID, and first name should be a column in the database. So does last name. And we don't want to put a directive already post, because post is just a GraphQL link. We want to put the link in the post actually. So let's put it here. And now because the author has a link directive declared, it links it to the author database table. So it uses this ID, and this way it will match it. And this one is also a column. So now we have GraphQL directives over all of our types. Okay, so let's look at the template that I copied here. And I know it might look a bit complicated and advanced, but actually when you dive into it, you can understand that just most of it is just if else and iteration over fields and uh, logic like that. And actually you can also implement custom helpers for handlebars, and um, there you can just write simple JavaScript code, just JS code, regular code. So let's try to generate and see the result. So we generated it, and let's take a look at the author type. So here we have the interface, and this is the basic interface, just like a typing's one. But we also have the Mongoose schema declared, and because we declared in the GraphQL schema that these fields are required, then the Mongoose schema also declares it, and we also have an interface for the actual database object, which is different from the GraphQL schema object because it has the ID and stuff that's specific to MongoDB and Mongoose. So now we have the model defined, and we can just use it anywhere in the code, and it's just like any other Mongoose declaration, but it's created from our schema. So if we change the schema, we can just generate it again and be getting the schema. And this code is relevant for all of our types. So post has the same. The author type is declared as link. So here behind the scenes we generate a Mongoose link for this type. Actually, if you use it in code, we can just use mongoose populate and just like basic database joins. So this is one of the cool things that you can do with the GraphQL code generator, and you can do much more. Think about it as a way to generate code from your GraphQL schema, and you can generate anything. This is just one example for generating an ORM, but we can actually do it for any database or any environment or any platform in any language. So if you have an idea for generator, feel free to contact me. So thank you for watching, and I hope that you'll find the code generator useful for you.